The supermarket on 14th Avenue was busy that Saturday afternoon. Fluorescent lights hummed softly overhead, reflecting off shiny linoleum floors. The air carried a mix of scents: fresh bread from the bakery, citrusy cleaning supplies, and the faint sweetness of candy from the checkout aisles. It was an ordinary day, at least for most of the people there. But for a few individuals, it would become a moment they would remember for a long time. The cashier, a young woman with her hair tied up in a tight bun and arms covered in tattoos, had been on her shift for 5 hours straight. Her name tag read, Kayla. Her job wasn't glamorous, and most days she just scanned items, bagged groceries, and moved people along. Yet, despite the routine, she liked her work. It allowed her to interact with strangers, see little snippets of their lives, and sometimes brighten their day with just a smile or a small joke. That afternoon, as she rang up customers, she noticed a man in line who didn't quite fit the casual scene of the grocery store. He was tall, wearing a dark navy suit that seemed more suited for a boardroom than for a grocery run. His hair was neatly styled, his shoes polished, and his presence carried a quiet authority. Standing beside him was a young girl, maybe 8 or 9 years old, in a cream-colored dress. She held onto his hand lightly, her eyes scanning the shelves of candy and gum with quiet longing. Kayla's eyes flicked to the little girl, then back to the man. He wasn't speaking, just watching the register as though his thoughts were elsewhere. His jawline was tight, his eyes heavy, like someone carrying a weight he couldn't set down. When their turn came, Kayla greeted them with her usual cheer. "Hey there. Did you find everything you needed today?" The man gave a small nod. "Yes." His voice was deep but clipped, polite without warmth. Kayla began scanning the items: a carton of milk, a loaf of bread, some fruit, and a small pack of cookies. It wasn't much. In fact, it was surprisingly little for someone dressed like him. She wondered briefly if he lived alone with the girl. Maybe a single dad. She had seen all kinds of family setups here, and she knew better than to judge. As she scanned the cookies, the little girl looked up eagerly. "Daddy, can we have those today?" she asked softly. The man glanced down at her and gave a tight smile. "We'll see." Kayla caught the exchange, and it warmed her heart a little. Parents and children had their own silent languages, and she could tell the man cared for his daughter, even if his face didn't show much. The total flashed on the register: $16.09. The man reached into his pocket for his wallet, but his movements slowed. He pulled out a card, then froze. His jaw clenched again, and for a moment his mask slipped, just long enough for Kayla to see something raw in his eyes. Embarrassment. Worry. Maybe even shame. The man slid the card, but the machine beeped, declined. A silence fell over the checkout lane. The little girl looked up at him, confused. The people behind in line began to shuffle impatiently, whispering to one another. Kayla's heart sank. She knew this moment too well. She had been on the other side of it once, years ago, when her own mom's card had been declined at a grocery store. The shame in her mother's eyes that day had etched itself into Kayla's memory like a scar. She looked at the man again. His face was still calm, but his hands gave him away. They trembled slightly as he tried another card. Declined again. The little girl tightened her grip on his sleeve. Kayla leaned forward slightly, lowering her voice so it wouldn't carry down the line. "Hey, it's okay," she said gently. "Don't worry about it." But the man shook his head. "I'm sorry," he muttered, already reaching to remove the cookies from the bag. "Just the milk and bread." The little girl's eyes filled with disappointment. She didn't protest, but her silence hurt more than any words could have. Kayla felt something stir inside her. Maybe it was empathy. Maybe it was the memory of her mom. Maybe it was just kindness. Whatever it was, she wasn't about to let this man leave the store feeling small in front of his daughter. With a smile, she said a little louder, "Oh no, sir, looks like today's your lucky day. Someone already covered your total." The man froze. "What?" Kayla tapped the register with a grin, her tattoos shifting as she pointed to the screen. "Yep. We've got a community program where people can pay it forward, and your order's on it. Happens once in a while. Pretty cool, huh?" The man blinked, clearly stunned. I don't understand." "Nothing to understand," she said brightly. "Your groceries are covered. You and your daughter can take them home, no problem." The little girl's eyes widened. Really? Really? Kayla said, winking at her. And that means you get to keep those cookies too. The girl's face lit up, pure joy spilling across her features. She looked up at her father, tugging on his sleeve. Daddy, did you hear? We can have the cookies. For the first time since stepping into the line, the man smiled. It was small at first, hesitant, but then it grew into something genuine. His shoulders seemed to loosen, and the heaviness in his eyes lifted just a bit. He looked at Kayla, searching her face for the truth. She simply nodded, pretending it was routine, when in reality she had just swiped her own debit card under the counter to cover the cost. The man's throat worked, as though he wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. At last, he managed, "Thank you." Kayla shrugged, keeping her tone casual. No big deal. Happens all the time. But inside, she felt the warmth of what she had done. She didn't care about the $16. What mattered was the way that little girl's smile seemed to brighten the entire store. The people in line, who had been impatient a moment earlier, were watching now. A woman with dark curly hair smiled softly. Another man gave a small nod, as if acknowledging the beauty of what had just happened. For a brief moment, the grocery store was no longer just a place of transactions, it was a place of humanity. As the man gathered his bags, he turned to his daughter. Say thank you. Thank you. The girl said brightly, her voice filled with innocence and gratitude. You're very welcome, Kayla replied. Enjoy those cookies. They walked away, and Kayla returned to her register as though nothing extraordinary had happened. But in her heart, she knew it had. What she didn't know was that the man in the suit, his name was Daniel, had been on the brink of giving up that day. He had recently lost his job, one that had supported him and his daughter since his wife passed away 2 years earlier. He had been interviewing, dressing in that same navy suit again and again, only to hear polite rejections. His savings were nearly gone, and he had been trying to stretch every dollar, keeping his daughter fed while hiding the truth from her as best as he could. That moment at the grocery store wasn't just about the groceries. It was about dignity. It was about hope. It was about being reminded that even when the world felt cold, kindness still existed. Later that evening, Daniel sat at the small kitchen table with his daughter. She was happily munching on the cookies, her legs swinging under the chair. He watched her, the sound of her laughter filling the room, and he thought about the cashier with tattoos and a warm smile. Daddy, his daughter said between bites. Today was a good day. He swallowed hard, his chest tightening with emotion. Yes, he whispered. It was. And for the first time in a long while, he believed it. What Kayla had given wasn't just food. She had given them hope, and sometimes hope is the most valuable gift a person can receive. Weeks later, Daniel would finally land a job. Not the one he had imagined, but one that allowed him to stand tall again. And whenever he walked past that supermarket, he remembered the young woman with tattoos who reminded him that kindness is never wasted. Kindness costs little, but its value is immeasurable. Sometimes it's as small as a smile, a gentle word, or a paid grocery bill. Yet in those small acts, lives can change. And in that supermarket on 14th Avenue, a little girl learned that the world is still full of good people, and a weary father was reminded that he wasn't alone.